Before we get started, allow me to spend a few words on our perspectives on the session, on cities and their watersheds and what to expect from it. Let me start with saying that in many parts of the world, cities are under increasing pressure to safeguard the water and sanitation services provision to an ever-growing urban population. And as climate change unfolds its drastic consequences on the hydrological cycle, cities are in need to build resilience against extreme weather events and prolonged periods of drought. And in the past years, we've seen that the term day zero and avoiding day zero has been frequently used. And this is our call to action to amplify actions against this day zero and to build resilience. Already today, population growth and urbanization are putting a lot of pressure and overburdening in many parts our infrastructure for water services delivery. And millions of urban dwellers are already today being left behind from the services provision. Especially in sub-Saharan Africa, but also parts of Asia, urbanization is projected to further accelerate over the next decades. Cities will continue to grow, and they demand substantial investments in the urban water and sanitation infrastructure. At the same time, this growing urban population is also dependent on increasingly contested and ever more degrading ecosystem services for water resources regeneration. And that brings us to our agenda for today, where we'll hear from 3 GIZ projects from 3 different continents who address the topic of urban water resilience in quite different settings and with different approaches. And they will give us a glimpse of current activities undertaken by the GIZ to support cities and to increase their resilience. After the 3 presentations, there will be a moment for question and answers. So I invite you all to put your questions throughout the session in the chat. And in the second part of the session, we will be joined by 3 panelists from the GIZ, from the Global Water Partnership, and from the World Resources Institute, who will together with us take a step back and discuss the way forward on how we as actors in development cooperation can work towards increasing urban resilience at scale. And with that, and also with a warm welcome to those who just joined us, you're just in time for the first speaker. I will give over to my colleague Carmen Segarra, who's a senior professional in our project in Peru. And Carmen, for you, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, so I'm super grateful and very happy that you were willing to join us. And without further ado, I would give the floor to you.
Okay. Bien. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carmen Segarra from Peru. I work for the PROAGUA program since 2007. Currently, I am in charge of the strategic management of the program. Today, I'm going to talk about the case study of Peru. To place into context a few facts. Peru is located in South America with more than 30 million inhabitants, having 7 of the 9 vulnerability characteristics identified by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Moreover, 62% of the country's population lives in the Pacific watersheds, which is a desert area with only 2% of total water resources. The capital of Peru is Lima, where 1/3 of the Peruvian population live and is settled in a desert, where the water availability per person is very limited. Next one, please. Now, I'd like to turn to the challenges of the water sector. Growing urbanization pushes an increasing water consumption, generating pollution of water bodies. This brings additional challenges to cities that are already under water shortages. Moreover, expected climate change and extreme events will worsen existing problems as well as bringing new ones. For this reason, PROAGUA aims to enhance urban water supply security of selected cities in a climate change context, focusing on boosting climate resilience conditions in cities, building capacities to protect water resources, ensuring staff qualification meets water sector demands, and mainstreaming SDG 6 and NDC into sectorial policy and planning. In this presentation, we are focusing on boosting climate resilience conditions. Next one, please. We are working in 3 coastal cities, Lima, Trujillo, and Piura, that have struggled water shortages due to extreme events. For example, in 2017, El Niño Costero produced in Lima a temporary water services shutdown. We analyzed the entire urban water cycle, identified the climate hazard at each stage and the impacts caused at the drinking water treatment plant, affecting the water supply provision. The floods increased turbidity, causing the water treatment plant's shutdown. We want to address the following questions. To what extent and how often do extreme events affect the water supply system? What problems these challenges cause? And how could water supply risk be reduced? Currently, we are working to strengthen capacities of our partners to address this question and identify measures to water supply risk reduction. Next one, please. In addition to extreme events, which are increasingly recurring and more intense, Peru is being highly affected by the pandemic, thus impacting on water security. Service providers are struggling to provide safe and reliable water and sanitation services while facing insufficient resources and personnel shortages. Prioritization of investment offers the opportunity to address the pandemic, but also ensuring urban water security, moving towards a carbon neutral and climate resilience recovery. PROAGUA has adapted its activities to meeting partners' demands and identifying measures for both climate and pandemic resilience, focusing on scaling up potential, supporting digitalization of processes and virtual formats for communication both at national and local levels. The next one, please. At national level, we are supporting the development of the National Sanitation Plan, introducing NDC and SDG 6 into sectorial policies, objectives, and investments, climate change mitigation and adaptation plan as management instruments to face climate mitigation and adaptation, virtual fora for exchanging experiences on how to address the pandemic among 700 personnel of national and international water utilities, guidelines for drawing of pandemic response plans, and training for utilities in partnership with academy. This brings me to the next sections. The next, please. At local level, we are strengthening the capacities of water utilities to meeting the water demand of vulnerable population under scarcity or prolonged shortages. These emergencies can be caused by extreme events or the pandemic. For example, we aim to ensure water supply in the cities of Lima, Piura, and Trujillo by improving operational responses, installing flexible reservoirs in critical areas. The next one, please. Finally, what next? In the future, we will strengthen capacities of water utilities to apply decision-making tools based on quantitative information and data. This quantitative analysis cost effect will help determine the failures in the water system of the 3 cities. It will help to analyze the cost benefits of measures that reduce the risks in water supply. By this means, we intend to determine additional costs per cubic meter for reducing water supply risk by 10%, Resilience measures that efficiently reduce risks and compare costs, efficiencies, and impact of measures. As a result, the resilience capacity of our partner is improved. Thank you for listening. Thank you
so much, Carmen. Thank you. And to our audience, again, if you have questions to Carmen, please put them in the chat and we will come back to them later during the Q&A session. Now, without further ado, I would go on to our second presenter. We have two presenters joining us from Tanzania today, Dr. Fred Leris and Christian Henschel. And yeah, Christian, Fred, I would invite you to unmute yourself and the floor is yours.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Greetings from Tanzania. My name is Christian Henschel. I'm an advisor in the GIZ Water program here for the last 5 years. And I would also like to introduce Dr. Fred Lerise, who's joining today. And he's a senior policy and organizational development advisor and has been here with GIZ in Tanzania for 10+ years. We take the challenge that was presented by Hanno at the beginning. Tanzanian utilities have increasing problems to address the increasing water demand of the cities due to quantity and quality. And our program uses or addresses water security and climate resilience in urban areas as a consequence. Our project is financed by BMZ with a budget of 6 million euros, is ongoing for a bit more than a year and will run until May 22. We're using a number of approaches that also all focus very much on stakeholder collaboration, but obviously are all very technical. So we'd like to go a bit into detail with that. And next slide, please. So we are working in Tanzania as a country in East Africa, and we're working in the southwest of the country, where together with our partner, the Ministry of Water, we have identified a number of cities with a risk-based approach. This is near Zambia, Malawi, and Mozambique in the country context. And so these 3 cities are being addressed with further upscaling then in the future on an overall country level. With this, I would like to hand over to Fred, who will start addressing the city context.
Thank you very much, Christian, for the introduction. 4 years ago, the stakeholders in Tanzania decided to find ways to achieve sustainable access to water and sanitation services. And they adopted what is now locally called town-wide master planning approach to guide city-level planning and investment. The planning approach is to be carried out jointly by the respective utility. In Tanzania, water supply and sanitation services are responsibility of a water supply and sanitation authority. We refer to this as a utility, together with the local governments, a shared responsibility. And they supposed to work together following the principle of leaving not only no one behind, but also no area of the town of the city should be left unattended. Now, after adopting that decision, the Ministry of Water was then responsible to develop a guide. And with support from GIZ, we put up a document. We call it a town level planning guide, which is being used to facilitate joint town level planning in several towns. And we will share now the experience from the 3 towns, which Christian has shown in the map. Next, please. Within the 3 towns, what we have achieved is that we have in place joint town level plans. These are plans produced by a team of experts created by the management of the utility and the management of the local government. And this team of experts will bring in the plans of the local government and the plans of the utility as the reference documents, with the town master plan as the key reference. In one of the towns, Mbeya, which is rather fast growing, with about 500,000 people and growing at 3.6%. We've been able to support the team to carry out the initial assessment, because that's the first activity, to assess the level and the risks. And through this assessment, it's clearly shown that in terms of access to water, it's fairly good, with about less than 80% of the households with access. But in terms of the sanitation service chain, only a very few, about 32% of the households. Fecal sludge management is a problem which is increasing water risks to particularly the water sources within the housing area, and this will be elaborated further by Christian. We also assess the solid waste handling, which is also increasing threats. After the assessment, the team will use various plans, documents, they analyze them, and they come up with a long-term situation and the long-term investments which are required to improve services. This is a jointly developed. After the long term, then the team works out a short-term improvement and identify priority projects. The most important thing to note here is that the priority projects are identified jointly and they are prioritized jointly, and then they utilize resources from the two institutions for their implementation. There are resources coming from the local government and there are resources coming from the utility. And once the plan is endorsed by the management of the two institutions, is now ready and is being used to guide other decisions, for example, in water supply, in water safety planning. And I would like to put this back to Christian to take us through the example of water safety planning.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So, Fred, the tool, the JTP that you introduced, will inform the responsible authorities about the water demands of the city. And now the next step will be to understand, is there actually enough water? So in order to do this, we are advising the partners to use the climate resilient water safety plans, which is a known and common tool worldwide. It is established in Tanzania as a guideline by the Ministry of Water, but it is not widely used. So we're assisting them now to establish the tool in a local context. The tool uses a risk assessment from catchment to consumer. So we're looking beyond the city boundaries into the catchment in a joint fashion. Again, it's a multi-stakeholder process that is led by the utility, but takes on board all relevant authorities such as Water Resource Management Agency, meteorological agencies, big water users, local government, and so on. And in this risk assessment, not only climate change, but even also the water demands, plus all the risks that are there in terms of water quantity and quality are being assessed. So if you look at this map, you will see there are a lot of red and blue spots. You will see that there are basically no secure water intakes. All these points indicate water intake for the utility. And so these are either have the blue spots mean water quality problems, or the red spots mean water quantity problems. So all of these will need to be addressed in this context. And so once these are being assessed, again, a plan will be prepared that will need to be implemented. And next slide, please. So we have those two plans. We have those coming out of the water safety planning and those coming out of the city infrastructure planning. And they are being addressed on two levels. One is the catchment management approach that we have developed and that is being implemented now in Tanzania. It's again a multi-stakeholder approach, bringing together all the users involved in risk in a catchment context, being informed and coordinated by the Water Resources Authority in the lead, but not implementing, just coordinating. And the goal and the outcome of this stakeholder forum is again a plan with clear commitments, and also in our case now we can see that even local budgets are being used for implementation. So it's very much depends on the different catchment context, and it's a very flexible tool. So this is where the issues in the catchment context come in, and Fred will explain more on the city context.
Yeah, with the catchment management inputs, now we are even stronger in terms of what actions we implement at the town level. Focus on water demand management, particularly water losses, and then improving coordinated infrastructure investment, because that's also critical. We are strongly supporting the implementation of the sanitation service chain and private sector involvement. And to crown it all, we have a skills development program which provides or ensures skilled technicians to implement the projects. The last slide, please. In this last slide, you will see that we are covering 3 levels at the planning and at implementation level, and the attempt is to combine both the geographical natural landscape and the institutional landscape to put it together, to focus on the town, to focus on the water source area, and beyond the town in the catchment which feeds the water sources feeding the town. We are happy to share more on this. Thank you very much for your attention.
Asante sana.
Asante sana, Christian. Thank you very much, Fred. Thank you again for this presentation. Again, if you have specific questions about this presentation, please put them in the chat and we will get to them after our next presentation, which brings us to input number 3, which comes to us from Jordan. And I'm happy to introduce you to Dr. Armin Magana, who's a component water manager for the Water Master Plan in Jordan. And please, Armin, the floor is yours.
Good morning to the case of Jordan. My name is Armin Magana. I have worked 16 years in Jordan, currently working on the 3rd National Water Master Plan. And I've also recently started a new project on desalination. The 3rd National Water Master Plan involves about 130 persons from the 3 water sector institutions and from the water utilities. Next slide, please. The population is centered in the northwest of the country between Amman and Irbid. So this is where most of the water actually goes, but it comes from other parts of the country. GIZ is working in the water sector in Jordan since a number of years. Currently, we have a good dozen of projects which focus on water resources management and your water utility support. Next, please. The general situation of Jordan is as follows. We have limited conventional water resources, and water supply highly depends on groundwater, not only for domestic supply, but also for irrigation. Agriculture constitutes more than 60% of water uses still. And we have an increasing gap concerning domestic water supply between supply and demand due to high population growth, migration, overuse, and climate change. Until recently, climate change has not been considered, nor has the decrease of exploitability of resources been considered in investment planning, and that's why the existing capital investment plan is rather unrealistic, and we are going to support the Ministry of Water and Irrigation in preparing an updated capital investment plan concerning the governance. We have unfortunately reduced spending of the government on projects in the water sector, but luckily we have still a high foreign donor funding. The tariffs do not cover operation and maintenance. That is why the infrastructure is largely neglected and we have high physical losses. The water sector is fragmented. We have 3 institutions and these have a weak capacity. Between these institutions and in the institutions, even there's a lack of coordination and also lack of coordination across the sectors. Next slide, please. I will just briefly show you the situation concerning the groundwater resources. These are nearly exhausted due to high overexploitation over the past decades. We currently have an abstraction which is 3 times higher than the natural recharge. That leads, as you can see on the right side, to rapid water level declines up to 10 meters and more in the northwest of the country, 5 meters in general. Next, please. And what this also leads to is in the future we will have a mobilization of brackish water resources towards the west or northwest, and that affects also the existing well fields which are in the western part of the country. Next, please. Water supply in Amman or for Amman depends on three main pillars. The first one is up in the north, surface water resources from the Yarmouk catchment shared with Syria, only 20% of the catchment in Jordan. This depends also on the willingness of cooperation with the Syrians. Then in the south you can see a large block of 100 million cubic meters. This is fossil groundwater from the DC aquifer, also shared the resource with Saudi Arabia. So it also depends on the cooperation with Saudi Arabia. In the middle of the country, you see brackish water desalination near the northern end of the Dead Sea. This is a very limited supply to Amman, but it will be increased in the future. The main pillar for future water supply will be seawater desalination in Aqaba, so far away source, increasingly a small number of sources. The costs will be higher, the losses will be higher, and there's also concern over increased or decreased water supply security. Next, please. This shows you the growing gap between demand and supply, while recently or until now we can largely cover the demand through providing water from surface fossil groundwater and groundwater resources to a level of 70 to 80%. In the future, this we can only meet from these resources 40% of the demand. That means that much of the future water supply will depend increasingly on desalination. This is the light blue block, the seawater desalination in Aqaba, and the other green block is other small projects. Next, please. Climate change impact. We have to expect that in the long term, until 2040, we will lose 15% of the available surface and groundwater resources. This is, however, based currently on an outdated regional climate change model. We are updating this information through a new hydrological model and a new climate change impact model. We are cooperating with ESCWA on this. In general, there is a more need for coordination across governmental institutions to adapt to climate change. Next, please. Over the course of the past year, we have prepared a report called Rapid Assessment. This is based on existing information and shows you how is the situation concerning domestic water supply. The consequences that we draw from this are the following. The investment planning must be adjusted. There should be less investments in wastewater projects and non-revenue projects, and there is a definite need of very high investments in desalination projects, which would augment water supply, and in water governance projects. Next one, please. What is the process? The GIZ, together with the Ministry of Water and Irrigation, is preparing the Water Master Plan. This is the basis for the Capital Investment Plan, together with the Infrastructure Master Plan that is prepared in parallel by US aid. From this Capital Investment Plan that we are supporting, the Ministry of Water and Irrigation will prepare a projects list, projects which are have prioritizations, and this will then be used by the donors for the implementation. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Armin. Thanks. So yeah, the floor is open. We already received some questions through the chat to the previous speakers. So I will just start addressing them. Starting with a question that came to Carmen, which were asked about the data input for your decision support tool, and where do you source the data, And also, how often do you update the data that feeds into your decision support tool?
Oh, thanks, Hanno. So I will help with the answering questions. Well, about that question, we are using the data from different sources, no? Where the water utility mainly from the national authority that elaborate climate data, and also from the authority of water, National Authority of Water. That is why we're working with different partnerships, but mainly from the water utilities. Unfortunately, the availability of the data depends of the institutions, but we are working on that, and it's very difficult to get all the data, but okay, we started just 6 months ago, and we hope that we could get some good results during the next months.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. And sorry for not introducing you.
Don't worry.
There was a second question that came to you, which asked about the involvement of the private sector and if or how the private sector is part of the solution in Lima.
Yes, the question was about the consortium, no? So because in Lima, there is a consortium between the private sector and the public sector, and it's very important to tell you or to announce. We are very glad to announce that this is working, fortunately, improving the situation of the watershed in Lima, no, in the capital city. Also, we have a water observatory, Observatorio del Agua, and this group is working with the actualization of the water resources model, planning model. The name is WIP, and the main thing is they are working on how to integrate this model with the groundwater model, ModFlow, and we are working also to improve that, or to help them to integrate both.
Thank you for that. And then there was a third question. We've seen in the presentation from Tanzania how they use and promote the use of water safety planning and climate resilient water safety planning. So Dennis Schmiege asked if such preventive risk management approaches also play a role in your case.
Well, preventive risk management approach plays a huge role in our project too. In fact, we are working with the Ministry of Housing, Construction and Sanitation in improving the guideline to include this analysis in their master plans, also in the master plan of water utilities. But still, it needs a lot of data, as the previous partner asked. How to implement that or how to integrate all the data is one of the goals that we are working on too. So, in fact, this exchange between different partnerships is very interesting to improve the work that we're working on. Thank you.
Thank you. And then there was a question that goes to Christian and Fred, also from Dennis, who asked, considering the different responsibilities within your catchment and the utility most likely not being responsible for catchment management, how do you address that within your water safety planning?
Okay, thank you for the question. This is exactly where the catchment management approach comes in, because obviously the utility will focus on their own service area and use their financing on improvements there. But once you go out of that beyond the intake, then you have a rather complex water user constellation with competing demands. And this is where the water basin water boards, the authorities here for water resource management, are supposed to take an active role. And they're already involved in the water safety planning, so they can easily take this up. So they will coordinate and lead a process to invite and inform those stakeholders that are involved in the potential conflict or in the conflict, and try to mitigate that actively by getting those commitments and trying to find, to guide with solutions, but also get specific technical expertise to do that. So the result will be a specific action plan that will be brought forward in a joint constellation between different stakeholders, especially with those water users that are involved in, that have been allocated too much or that are using too much water and compromise urban water quality in the city.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.
Then we have a couple of questions that came in for Armin. Starting with, what's your plan? What's your approach for better coordination in Jordan?
Yes, we have introduced the so-called Joint Planning Committee, where we meet with all those who are planning projects so that they actually exchange on what is the plan to do in wastewater, in treated wastewater reuse, in all these different energy for water, in all these different sectors, so that everybody knows from each other what they are doing. This was not the case before. Unfortunately, then Corona started, so we had to interrupt these activities because this really needs presence and exchange with the partners. But yeah, we are resuming this activity as soon as we can. I'm currently in Germany still. Yeah, this needs our attention and it's very important to have this exchange among all people.
All right, and then I will take 3 questions at once here. Miyako asked about how you coordinate with climate change concerns institutions like the national adaptation plans. And Robert also asked how the water master plan relates to national determined contributions, also a climate component. And then also from Alexander, the question, what is the added value of a 3rd master plan?
Okay, I will start with the last one. Good. The first one was in 1977, the second one in 2004. It seems to be something like 20-year intervals that a master plan is needed. It is a huge effort, to be honest. And it is not done within a short time. We will need about 4 years to do this. Together, we have now covered 1.5 years. The plan is not finished because we have to cover all the sectors. And concerning climate change, we are just beginning to work on this coordination. It is a must, of course, because so far this is not really considered in any planning, in town planning. In no way climate change has so far been really or the impacts of climate change have been quantified sufficiently and integrated in the planning. Yeah, that's what I can say for now.
Okay, thank you very much, Armin. I realized there were 2 more questions, one about a contract to deliver water to Israel and one about non-revenue water. But unfortunately, we are already running a little bit behind our schedule. So I would propose to answer those questions in writing, and we come back to that later after the session. And we would then now move on to the second part of the session, where I'm delighted to introduce our panel. So we are joined today by Barbara Gehager. Barbara is the head of section for the Competence Center on Water, Wastewater and Waste Management here at the GIZ. And we are also joined by Dr. Loreen Castillo. She's a transboundary water governance and environmental specialist of the Global Water Partnership in South Africa. And we are also delighted to have Rogier van der Berg with us. He's the Director of Urban Development at the World Resources Institute Ross Center for Sustainable Cities. So I would start with giving the floor, to Barbara first. Barbara, I would invite you to briefly introduce yourself a bit further. And we have just seen 3 examples of how we as GIZ on a project level addressed urban water resilience. And I would like you to give us a brief statement of how this relates to the overall objectives, the approach and the strategy of the GIZ to engage in this thematic field moving forward. So Barbara, with that, I would hand over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Hanno, and thank you very much also to the presenter. to say 2-3 more words to me, I'm an engineer by profession, by technical environment protection. I was working a long time abroad in Africa, Uganda, Kenya, and Yemen. And yeah, I'd love to be heading now the competence center where we combine the planning process, but also knowledge management and innovation management. And I'm keen to be here today to talk a bit more about where we are heading at GIZ. And where we are heading at is explained very nicely, is in a good combination of what we have seen in Tanzania. So we want to focus much more in future on growing cities and their catchment. So definitely in the growing cities, access to sanitation and water is key. And next to this, it's also very much important to much more focus into urban planning, into water resilient urban planning, what was shown as well from the Tanzanian case, as also from the Jordanian case. As I said, there are old master plans which are not yet climate resilient. So to focus this on and to enable the organizations there to make their cities climate resilient. Another thing is also to support the water sector to enable to tap into climate financing. There we need to have a much closer partnership with the climate sector. So there are a lot of funds, but until now we need to better connect. So this was very nice shown in the case from Peru. So include in our sector policy NDC and also team up with the climate sector to enable the strategy and link it up to the NDC planning of the country, to be able to get financing, to see of what are the crucial points in the town and in the catchment, and where do we have to first work on to enable the access as well as enable enough climate water resources for the town. This is the first line we go. The second line we want to follow more stronger, or we do already and want to emphasize, is to get water a much better role in economic development. What does this mean? Is to closely partner up the water sector together with the private sector. Private sector already highlights that water resource is one of the crucial resources. So for us, it is important that our partner in our countries are able to team up with them in kind of being able to having a platform for a fair share of water resources and a transparent share of water resources. And secondly, it is important that the water sector plays a much stronger role if you talk about urban development and economic development. So be a partner of the private sector and be a partner of urban development to be part of having a prosperous city. And a third very much important line is to focus on scaling up. So focus much more in one time we have a focus on urban growing centers and their catchments, and we have to learn the other towns in the country also to see what is there to enable them to scale up in other areas, and also to team up much closer with other donors. So either we can do it in other towns, or others should learn from us and do it then in other towns to be able to better reach and be much better reaching our SDG target and the target of climate resilience in the towns. And there it's also important to team up with other organizations to use each other tools. What also was shown very nicely in the Tanzanian case, there are tools already to use resources and to be better in getting where we want to be in climate resilient cities. Thank you very much so far, and I hope to have some time then for receiving questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Thanks for these opening remarks. And I would hand over directly to Loreen to your response. I happen to know that you also have a lot to contribute when it comes to the financing component and how we can get this infrastructure in place and management approaches on the way. So Loreen Castillo, I would hand over to you, ask you also to briefly introduce yourself, and then we welcome your statement.
Thanks, Hanno, and good day, everyone. So yeah, with Global Water Partnership, essentially we have what, but before I go up to Global Water Partnership, let me introduce myself. I'm Lorraine Catillo. I'm working with Global Water Partnership, and I'm managing the Transboundary Water Governance and Environment portfolio. So under that portfolio, we do have the Continental Africa Water Investment Program, whose objectives are in alignment to the objectives that have been discussed on this session. In that we have a focus on improving the investment climate and enabling environment for implementation of integrated plans. And then we also have a focus on building capacity for the preparation, implementation of water, health, energy, food nexus projects. So from the preparation angle, we are talking all the way from planning of a project pipeline that speaks to an integrated infrastructure portfolio. So in the context of sustainable cities, this is looking at all the way, the range of infrastructure, all the way from enhancing security around water flows for energy for the city, enhancing security around water flows for water quantities, water supply to the city. So what this means is that we come up with a project portfolio, a project pipeline, or we promote the preparation of a project pipeline that is holistic. So the approach that we promote is actually, we call it so-called water security investment planning, where you're taking a holistic approach and you're looking at infrastructure, not only in the sense of gray infrastructure, but you're also looking at natural infrastructure. So you want to have security of supply, security of flows. And this is usually done in an integrated catchment management, integrated water resources management context, where we have multi-sectoral stakeholders coming to the table, and there is deliberation and discussion around what objectives need to be met in terms of ensuring water security. So because of this kind of multi-stakeholder approach, where we're looking at all the sort of integrated frameworks, sustainable landscape management, even water, health, energy, food nexus thinking, we come up with this project pipeline, which may run the gamut from e-flows, restoration of ecosystems, and also maybe multi-purpose dams that speak to agricultural production, that speak to hydropower generation. And this, once this case has been made in terms of what really constitutes an integrated infrastructure pipeline for a city to ensure water security, then we look at how can this be financed? How can the project pipeline be financed? And for that, the experience has been, it's not very easy to finance water infrastructure projects. So there's a number of reasons for that. Well, some of them speak to the sort of return on investment. Some of them speak to the capacity of the stakeholders or the institutions that are responsible to package these projects in a way that can actually make them investment ready. So under this AIP, Africa Investment Program, we are trying to build capacity for project packaging and project preparation in partnership with other entities. And we're also trying to look at what financing mechanisms can be used to finance some of these projects. The general thinking is that taxation, and governments are responsible for financing or brokering financing arrangements. But our experience has been that the share of GDP captured through taxes is usually not adequate for such financing. So we have to come up with innovative financing approaches in order to be able to finance this kind of integrated infrastructure projects. So the way we have crafted this particular program is that we first build this political buy-in and also just an understanding of what really is an integrated project pipeline for sustainable cities. And then we try to build the capacities for financing. Typical cases, 2 cases in point. The first one is where we have a partnership with GIZ in Lesotho, and we are supporting Lesotho to develop the Lesotho Water Security Investment Plan. So the bigger project pipeline, but part of that includes picking a particular water, health, energy, food nexus project and actually doing the project preparations all the way to packaging it for green climate financing. The second example is where we are supporting the development of the climate adaptation case for the border town of Livingstone. This is a town which is between Zambia and Zimbabwe. So we're trying to build the climate adaptation case so in order to make it eligible for green climate financing. So in this way, we are exploring the different financing mechanisms that can sort of come to the table to ensure that water infrastructure is financed. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Loreen. So we had now 2 times the importance of investment, of climate investments, partnerships, and scaling up, a project pipeline to scale up. And with that, I would like to give the floor to Rogier van den Berg, our last speaker in this panel. He's the Director of Urban Development at the WRI Ross Center for Sustainable Cities. And Rogier, I would also invite you to briefly introduce yourself, about your background. And then please, from your perspective, from your work on working with sustainable urban development from a multitude of perspectives and sectors and angles, and a different consortium of partnerships as well. Please give us your vision of how we can address that scale. So Rogier, please.
Thanks, Hanno. So and thanks for everyone that I mean, this is a great session, absolutely great session. And so I'm Rogier. I'm currently in Rotterdam. I'm actually should be based in Washington DC, but due to COVID-19, I'm kind of stuck in still the beautiful city of Rotterdam. I'm leading the urban development work in the Ross Center of the World Resources Institute, and we support cities with research and strategic project implementation to become more resilient, more inclusive, and low carbon. That is kind of the key objective of what we do. Before that, I was living in Nairobi in Kenya. I was with UN Habitat, working closely with cities on urban planning, strategic urban planning issues and considerations, both on the continent in Africa, but also in many other places around the globe. And I'm trained as an architect and urban planner, so then you know where I'm coming from. I really think, and I'm echoing what Barbara says, that let me put 2 or 3 points forward. One is that cities do not consider water enough as a key strategic urban planning tool. Somehow historically cities understand that gray infrastructure planning, you know, highways, trains, and these type of infrastructure is the development tool and kind of the key development tool for their cities. But ever more, and we all know that because we are here with many specialists that are working in the water sector, that you know, the quality of water, the water supply, the flooding, stormwater management are going to become ever more kind of the key determining how we plan our cities, where we can grow, but also how cities can potentially transform kind of communities, and what is needed then in terms of spatial planning in combination with water management tools. I also see that that requires, and you see that urban water resilience practice that brings together urban planning considerations and water resilience, you see that emerge. So I was with UN Habitat, I was part of the Water as Leverage program spearheaded by the Dutch in Asia, in Bangladesh, Indonesia, and India. And I'm now together with my colleague Betsy Otto of the water team of World Resources Institute. We are working on the Urban Water Resilience Project in Africa, funded by BMZ, in which we bring together the urban dimension, the spatial dimension, and the water dimension. And I'm echoing the words, I think, of Christian. We look at catchment from catchment to consumer, but at the same time we bring in a lot of other kind of aspects that are relevant to take into consideration when cities and city leaders plan their cities, and where they consider what are the strategic investment opportunities that we are looking at. To give you an example, and maybe one thing to mention is that requires quite a different approach to how you look at data and analytics. So one of the first things that we are kind of exploring and testing right now in that urban water resilience program is to bring together data sets on vegetation loss, on urban water change, surface water change, and urban patterns in one kind of geospatial image that can provide you a huge amount of information, and it can provide cities information on where they find kind of key overlaps or opportunities, but also where the biggest risks are. And especially in Africa, cities are growing rapidly over their own municipal boundaries, often growing into natural assets and water resources. That whole kind of trend is going to make kind of water supply ever more complicated. Maybe then the last point is that, and that is especially on scale. So cities are, if you talk about urban planning, cities are not used to look at the regional dimension per se, and especially secondary cities that now rapidly growing, they don't look at it as such. Also, often that is a mandate of another authority, either a regional authority if it already exists, often a national authority. So bringing that basin level approach to water and a city regional approach to planning together is really the way to go. I can talk for much longer, but I see that we only have 2 minutes left. I am actually very excited and interested to touch base with many of the speakers and others that are interested in this panel. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Roger. Then, yes, I said we have now 1 minute left, but we have a question at Loreen. And a question comes from Ms. Parker asking if you could elaborate on the Livingstone climate adaptation project, right? Please.
Okay, thanks for that question. So the project is around upgrading the Livingstone water and sanitation infrastructure. And so the attempt is to actually do that using green climate funds. But as you know, for green climate funding, you have to have a strong kind of climate rationale for that. So it's around packaging the project in such a way that you articulate that climate adaptation rationale. And actually, we are doing this with partners. I saw also that there was a question around partners. We're doing this with the Development Bank of Southern Africa. That's one of the partners. We are doing this with CREDIF and also SWSC. So yeah, it's around packaging for adaptation funding.
Great, thank you very much. Our time is already up. We only had 1 hour, and there's a huge lineup of interesting sessions throughout this World Water Week or the Week on Water for Development. So I would invite you all to move on to the next sessions, to enjoy the rest of this week. Let's make the most out of it. I'm happy to connect with you on the session later on, connect you to the speakers. And I would like to thank all the speakers and panelists very, very much. And I wish you all the best for this week. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Hanno.
Yes, thanks, Hanno.
Bye-bye.